Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Josh Minkler. I'm the United States Attorney for the Southern District of Indiana. I'm joined here today with some important public safety leaders. Joined today by the Boone County Sheriff, Mike Nielsen. I am joined by the Chief of Police of the Terre Haute Police Department, John Plasse. That's P-L-A-S-S-E. I am joined by the Chief of Police of the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, Brian Roach. I am joined by the Assistant Special Agent in charge of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, Roland Herndon. I am joined by the United States Marshal, Dan McClain. I am joined by two Assistant United States Attorneys who are prosecuting cases you're going to hear about. Will McCoskey, who is an Assistant United States Attorney, a federal prosecutor here in this office, and our Senior Litigation Counsel, Assistant United States Attorney Brad Blackington, who's also a federal prosecutor prosecuting cases here in this office. The first thing I'm going to talk about are federal criminal charges against three defendants. The first is Dawn Rochon, R-O-C-H-O-N, age 29, of Indianapolis, Indiana. She has been indicted in an 8-count indictment involving false statements made to acquire 4 firearms. That's a 10-year felony. She is currently in federal custody, and you all should have been provided copies of that indictment. I will also be talking about criminal charges against Tiffany Dean of West Terre Haute, Indiana, age 33, and Levi Brenton, B-R-E-N-T-O-N, age 20, of Terre Haute, Indiana. They were charged by a criminal complaint involving the illegal acquisition of a firearm, the illegal possession of a firearm, and the illegal transfer of a firearm. These charges are commonly referred to as what's called a lie and buy from a firearm store, also sometimes referred to as a straw purchase. Ms. Dean and Mr. Brenton are currently in federal custody. The penalties, if they were convicted, are 10-year felonies. You should have been provided copies with the criminal complaint. So in general, the first thing we're going to do is to make some remarks about the two lie and buy cases which I've described. After that, I will recognize some of the law enforcement leadership who are going to talk to you about the importance of these lie and buy cases. And then after that, we're going to talk a little bit about the Department of Justice's answer to the problem of gun violence, which is the Project Safe Neighborhoods program. And if we have any time after that, hopefully we have a few questions. So that's the plan here today, and that's how we're going to proceed. When guns are possessed, sold, used, or acquired illegally, it is never for a good reason, and the results are often tragic. Nowhere does that statement ring truer than here in the Southern District of Indiana. In a 2-month period, March and May of 2018, 2 law enforcement officers were shot and killed in the line of duty. First, Boone County Sheriff's Deputy Jacob Pickett was shot and killed in the line of duty in March of 2018 outside of Lebanon, Indiana, when he was pursuing with others a fleeing suspect, an individual who could not legally possess a gun. Then, as this community was still reacting to that, on May 4th, 2018, Terre Haute police officer and task force officer for the United States Marshal Service, Rob Pitts, was shot and killed in the line of duty as he was attempting to arrest a fugitive. Today, in announcing these charges, I can give you all some answers to questions about the choices people made that eventually put guns in the hands of killers. In short, the gun used to kill Deputy Pickett and the gun used to kill Officer Pitts were purchased in violation of federal law. And as a result of that, two men who had no legal right to possess a gun shot and killed two brave law enforcement officers. First, I would like to address the senseless murder of Deputy Pickett. The man charged with his murder was prohibited under federal law from purchasing or possessing a gun. Enter an individual by the name of Don Rochon. Don Rochon could legally purchase a gun. According to the indictment, on 4 occasions, March 15, 2016, February 28, 2017, April 11, 2017, and May 15, 2017, Dawn Rochon went to the Indy Gun Bunker, and each time she went to the Indy Gun Bunker, she purchased a gun. And each time she went to the Indy Gun Bunker to purchase a gun, she lied on the form which is required to fill out to purchase a gun. And each time she did that, those lies were material. Had she told the truth, they would not have allowed her to purchase the gun. Of the 4 guns that Dawn Rochon purchased illegally, of the 4 guns purchased, 3 of those guns have been used in crimes and recovered by law enforcement. One of those guns, the gun she illegally acquired on February 28, 2017, was the gun that was used to shoot and kill Deputy Jake Pickett on March 3, 2018. Next, I would like to address the murder, equally senseless, of Officer Pitts in Terre Haute on May 4, 2018. Again, the killer, the trigger puller, could not legally possess, use, or acquire a gun. That killer could not walk into a gun store and buy a gun. All of those things are prohibited by federal law, and there is a check system in place to prevent that from occurring. In this case, enter Tiffany Dean and Levi Brenton. Dean could legally acquire a gun. Brenton could not. So on February 13th, 2017, Dean and Brenton went to Top Guns in Terre Haute, Indiana. Brenton picked out the gun he wanted, and Dean purchased the gun. She immediately gave it to Brenton. If Dean had told or put on the form that she was purchasing the gun for Brenton, or that she was buying the gun for Brenton, she could not have purchased the gun. The gun would not have been put in her hands. Dean told Top Gun she was buying the gun for herself. Once she obtained the gun, she immediately gave it to Brenton. Again, this is referred to a straw purchase or a lie and buy. As alleged in the complaint, Brenton was in the marijuana game and could not legally possess the gun. Because of that, he was also too young to buy the gun. As alleged in the criminal complaint, in April of 2018, Brenton transferred the gun to Chris Wolf, an individual that he had purchased marijuana from. And on May 4th, 2018, Chris Wolf, using that same gun, shot and killed Officer Rob Pitts in Terre Haute, Indiana. The pattern in both cases is crystal clear. Illegal purchases of guns, illegal possession of guns, illegal transfers of guns, an underground gun economy, all in violation of laws created by Congress to prevent shootings. These laws, as alleged in the indictment and alleged in the criminal complaint were violated, and the results were tragic. The guns ended up in the hands of trigger pullers who eventually used those guns to kill law enforcement officers. Like many of you, we all watched the national news coverage of these cases. One of the national news clips that I watched more than once showed Officer Pitt's son going to school after his father's murder, escorted by law enforcement. What is alleged in that criminal complaint makes a very clear point. If either Miss Dean or Miss Brenton or Mr. Brenton followed the law, if they did what they were supposed to do, if they did what law-abiding citizens are required to do, that gun would never have been in Wolf's hand, and the senseless killing would never have happened. Officer Pitts could have walked his son to school that day and many more in the future. It did not happen because of violation of federal law, choices that people made that put guns in the underground economy and led to tragic consequences. The results are familiar in this community and are specifically familiar to the law enforcement officers standing behind me. 2 brave police officers killed in the line of duty. 2 families devastated. 2 communities and their law enforcement agencies still recovering. And 3 defendants, Rashawn, Dean, and Brenton, facing harsh and necessarily harsh consequences and accountability that come with federal criminal charges. Anybody that introduces guns into the underground economy in violation of federal law must be held accountable. The shootings must stop. Today, I am joined by some law enforcement leadership that have been supportive, powerfully supportive of that message and powerfully supportive of federal law enforcement. The first is the sheriff from Boone County, Sheriff Mike Nielsen. Sheriff.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate it very much. What I can tell you is thank you from the bottom of our hearts at the Sheriff's Office. We are just a little over 3 months post-incident after losing Jake. And I talked to Jen about every other day, and I had a long conversation with her this week before she went to Florida. And on behalf of her, the 2 little boys, and her family, thank you. Mr. Minkler, thank you for the support that the federal agents, ATF, FBI, you name it, they were there in support of our agency post-incident that day within the hour. So you don't know the partnership that we have with the federal agencies. The Indiana State Police, Captain Mike Beard from my office, has been instrumental in making sure that we cross our T's and dot every I to make sure that Mr. Baumgart is held accountable. And I know that on the federal side, Josh and his team will make sure that the other folks will be held accountable when it comes to these gun law violations. So thank you very much. We will never recover from this. We will try to get back to what that new normal is going to be. But until you stand in an administrator's shoes and lose somebody underneath your watch, you have no idea how it affects us. And we've been there in the last 3 months. So thank you again, Josh, for everything you're doing for us, and from the family, we appreciate it.
Also here, joining us, who has been very supportive for a long time of federal law enforcement and supportive in helping us investigate this case, is the Chief of Police from the Terre Haute Police Department, John Plassey. Chief.
Thank you, and I also want to echo the Sheriff's comments of the support we received is tremendous, and We look forward to our continued relationship with all federal agencies now and in the future. But on behalf of the Terre Haute Police Department, the citizens of Terre Haute, and most importantly, Rob Pitt's family, I want to again thank you for bringing those to justice who helped bring these weapons where they shouldn't have been. We hope this sends a message to others that they will be held accountable when they place firearms in the hands of those that should not have them. We know nothing can be done to bring back our friend. However, holding these individuals responsible for their actions will help us with the healing process. Again, we thank you for your support and look forward to the continued relationship, and hope again that this sends a message for those that take actions to put guns in the hands of ones that don't deserve them, that we're watching, and they will be held accountable. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. The lead agency investigating firearms violations like this, who, as both the sheriff and the chief pointed out, respond within the hour to officer shootings like this, is the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosive. We are joined today by the Assistant Special Agent in charge of that federal law enforcement organization, Roland Herndon. Roland?
Thank you. This is a hard situation. At the men and women of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, we prosecute firearms violations across the country, but this time it's a little bit more personal. As the sheriff just said a minute ago, it's hard when we lose members of our command. I'm one of those that have also lost someone under my command, and as you all know, we've had 2 ATF agents shot in the last month in the Chicagoland area. We will continue to fight this fight. We will always fight this fight. We will always bring those to justice that violate these laws. But it takes a toll on us also. And we will continue to fight, and we will continue to do our best, but we have to have the community's help in these type of situations. We cannot do our job without the help of the community and without information being received to us. In this situation, other situations around the country, tips have come in from community members to help guide us in these situations, and we could not do this without the community. So once again, I would say thank you to the officers and the work that we all do together, but I also say thank you to those who called and gave us information to allow us to do what we have to do. We will continue to do this, and we will continue to bring those to justice who misuse firearms, especially against the citizens of the United States.
As I mentioned, Officer Pitts was a brave officer with the Terre Haute Police Department. He was also designated, cross-designated as a task force officer with our United States Marshal Service. So we have the United States Marshal here with us today, Dan McClain. Marshal?
I'd just like to thank you, Mr. Minkler, for all you do for writing these federal warrants for these folks. As you know, the Marshal Service job is to go after these individuals that have federal warrants on them, and we, along with the Attorney's Office, have doubled down on that, putting every effort into those cases. Officer Pitts was a task force officer, and as you can see up here standing beside me are our local, state, and federal officers. We all work together on this. We work diligently on it, and it's these local officers that are task force associated that are our eyes and ears on the ground, that go in day after day and deal with these folks that are breaking the law and committing these atrocities. So again, thank you for your efforts. I'd like to thank everybody standing with me up here. I'm a former sheriff, so I know what it's like to be on both sides of this. But from the Marshal Service, we're doubling down and doing what we can to help our brothers in arms. Thanks.
Thank you, Marshal. On the Dawn Rashawn Lionby case, the Assistant United States Attorney, the federal prosecutor who will take this case into court and represent the United States of America, is Will McCoskey. Will?
Thank you. The indictment against Ms. Rashawn would not have been possible if not for the great combined efforts of federal, state, and local law enforcement in the wake of the tragic and horrific murder of Deputy Jacob Pickett. I'm very honored and privileged to be a part of this collaborative investigative effort, and I just want to take this opportunity to reiterate what's been said up here about the hard work of law enforcement, but I'll restate it. I appreciate all the hard work that all of our law enforcement officers and partners have been doing, not only in this case, but in every case where they're out there working hard to keep our communities safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. The prosecutor in the Ms. Dean and Mr. Brenton matter, another lie-and-buy and illegal transfer that led to the death of Officer Pitts, is Federal Prosecutor Brad Blackington. Brad is also the Senior Litigation Counsel for the United States Attorney's Office. Brad?
I just wanted to say something briefly about Rob Pitts. I've known Rob well for the past 9 years. He was a police officer with the Terre Haute Police Department, and he was deputized with the Marshal Service in Terre Haute. Rob was involved instrumentally in just about every significant drug prosecution we've done in Terre Haute over the last 9 years or so, beginning with the Wesley Hammond case. I simply want Rob's family, the Terre Haute Police Department, and the community to know that our office stands with them in this difficult hour, and we stand with the police and the community to attempt to take all of these firearms out of the community where there are way too many firearms in the hands of dangerous people and drug traffickers. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. These prosecutions are part of a Department of Justice strategy. The Department of Justice strategy is known as Project Safe Neighborhoods. The initials PSN hopefully now are familiar to you. The primary job of the United States Attorney's Office is to answer our district's, and that is the Southern District, to answer our district's biggest challenges and answer those challenges with the most consequential type of response. Make no mistake about it, gun violence in the Southern District of Indiana and in our community is about as big a challenge as any United States attorney has ever faced. Violent crime in Indianapolis is 250% of the national average. 2.5 times more likely to be a victim of violent crime in Indianapolis as other places in the country. Murder is 400% of the national average. 4 times more likely to be a victim of a murder in Indianapolis than other places. Those numbers have grown every year for the last 7. According to the recent data, we've had 69 homicides. At least 62 of those have been determined to be murders. We've had nearly 182 non-fatal shootings. When Officer Pitts was shot and when Deputy Pickett was shot, I had an opportunity to meet with their families, exchange my condolences, offer words from the Attorney General. But as you look at these maps, these are people that I haven't met with, families that I haven't met with. The homicide map, which is on the right, has a map of incident locations, every dot representing a homicide, every dot representing a family, a group of friends impacted by that homicide. Every dot, and you can see some are clustered occurring in a neighborhood, knowing somebody was shot and killed or murdered. The other map, the non-fatal shootings, you can see the neighborhoods where gunshots are heard regularly. The person shot does not die, but their lives impacted, their families' lives impacted. You live in that neighborhood, you hear the gunshots. Can you go outside? Can you let your kids run around? It affects the quality of life. Make no mistake about it, gun violence and the number of shootings is as big a challenge as any of us in this room face. The department's answer to that challenge is Project Safe Neighborhoods. Project Safe Neighborhoods is a proven response using outreach, prevention, and enforcement of federal gun laws. We've been doing a lot of outreach and prevention. 2 weeks ago, I think many of you joined us at IPS School 46, Daniel Webster, where we had the Justice League graduation ceremony. 19, 12, and 13-year-old young men learning leadership skills, working with lawyers from our office and Indianapolis police officers, working not just on leadership skills, but on ways to resolve disputes without violence. Those young men got out of school, immediately began paying it forward, teaching those leadership skills, those conflict resolution skills to others in their community. Last week, that group of young men that was mentored under the Justice League Leadership Academy were out in their neighborhoods, picking out garbage, cleaning up their neighborhoods, paying it forward. Many of you have seen the office, our office's reentry job fair, where we work with people released from prison to try to find them jobs. You have a job, less likely to be a recidivist. That prevents crime. Many of you know about our REACH court. We've expanded that court from 1 to 2 courts in federal court. Again, working with individuals getting out of prison to keep them from committing another crime, to keep them from picking up a gun, to making unwise choices. I've met with the Urban League. I've met with the Marion County state judges. I've called for a return to the lever pulling that worked so well 10, 15 years ago, where everybody on state probation and parole called to meet with law enforcement and is told the consequences of having a gun with a felony, but is also offered help in terms of getting a job and getting their licenses restored. On Wednesday, I'll meet with the Chamber of Commerce. Next Monday, I will meet with the City County Council. We are doing a lot of outreach and prevention in association with Project Safe Neighborhoods. But today, I'm here to talk about our enforcement efforts. Enforcement of the federal gun laws is the cornerstone of Project Safe Neighborhood. In January of 2018, the United States Attorney's Office committed 6 assistant United States attorneys to each of the IMPD police districts and also 1 in Evansville. ATF equaled that commitment. They committed a federal agent and a TFO, a task force officer, to each of those districts with one simple goal: to reduce shootings. And our plan to reduce shootings was a proven strategy of increased federal law enforcement of the gun laws. To date, the data we have found, and if you look at the maps, it's supported. The areas where there are the most non-fatal shootings, the areas where there are the most murders, are also the areas where there are the most violations of federal laws. Those areas are where the more shootings, where there are the most shootings, where the most non-fatal shootings or murders, are also the areas where there is more illegal possession of firearms, illegal use of firearms, illegal acquisition of firearms. Those neighborhoods are the areas where there is the underground gun economy. And individuals are arming themselves and are committing crimes. Let me give you some examples. There's a lot of cases that we've prosecuted. I've just selected 5. In Evansville, Franklin Fitzpatrick came from Louisville to Evansville. He was a twice convicted felon selling methamphetamine while in possession of 3 guns. Clearly a threat to that community. Correll Filzen, age 28, Indianapolis, previously convicted felon, had a firearm and was brandishing it during crimes of violence, including 8 business robberies here in Indianapolis. Brennan Rogers, 48, of Indianapolis, while in possession of drugs, was also in possession of a 9mm handgun and a 9mm Tec-9 pistol. Anthony White, age 20, and Brian York, age 30, both from Indianapolis, both prohibited from possessing guns, were brandishing and using firearms while they robbed $6 general stores and a BP gas station. Lawrence Bible of Indianapolis, 24, while under state court supervision, a convicted felon on 2 separate drug-related charges in possession of a loaded firearm. These are some of the individuals who have been targeted and prosecuted under Project Safe Neighborhoods. Targeting individuals likely to commit crimes of violence are committing crimes of violence in order to reduce the shootings in that neighborhood. In total, so far in 2018, 117 defendants have been prosecuted for federal crimes. 117 defendants are now facing federal penalties, including pretrial detention, being held without bond. In some cases, mandatory minimum sentences, 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, in some cases, life in prison. And federal prisons located outside of the state of Indiana, in some cases 100 or 1,000 miles away. If this sounds like a lot of defendants coming to federal court, it is. If this sounds like a classic get tough on crime approach, it is. If the consequences of arrest and conviction for these crimes sound harsh, they are necessarily harsh. Why are we doing this? Our goal is simple: to bring down the record number of shootings, to find the tipping point that will reduce gun violence. We know Project Safe Neighborhoods works. From 2003 to 2008, this was the Department of Justice's comprehensive violent crime reduction strategy. In 2009, the final Project Safe Neighborhoods research approach concluded that Project Safe Neighborhoods was responsible for a 4.1% reduction in violent crime. Crime was actually reduced up to 42% in some specific locations. The prosecution of those possessing illegal firearms or acquiring firearms illegally is an important target for federal prosecutors because, with very rare exceptions, federal prosecutors do not have jurisdiction and federal courts do not have jurisdictions over gun murders or over non-fatal shootings. Those cases belong and are well prosecuted by our state and local prosecutors. However, Congress has passed specific laws designed to reduce shootings. And with those laws, they have provided punishment, sometimes harsh punishment, to those who illegally possess, use, sell, or acquire guns. There is a reason for that. The illegal gun use, the illegal gun possession, the illegal gun acquisition and transfer, as we have seen today, has a direct link to gun violence, often with tragic results. So, if you're asking if all of us up here are going to aggressively enforce those laws that Congress has given us, the answer is yes. Where are we going to aggressively enforce those laws? In the areas where are the most shootings. Who are we going to enforce those laws against? The individuals that are most likely to commit crimes of violence. And why are we doing this? One simple goal: to reduce the shootings. My ask of you is very simple. If you live in a community experiencing gun violence, and this is to each and every one of you that live in those communities, you should not tolerate it. You should not have to tolerate it. And I apologize that you do have to tolerate it. I am coming out to your community. I want to meet with you and talk with you and let you know how I intend to use federal enforcement of our laws to make your community better. Federal law enforcement, state law enforcement, and local law enforcement wants your information. We want to talk with you, and yes, we want your support. We want those communities that are experiencing a high number of shootings, an unacceptable level of gun violence, to say to us collectively, we want you to enforce the federal laws. If you're doing outreach and prevention, and I mentioned we're doing quite a bit of that, it's hard. Thank you for your remarkable efforts to all of those who are doing outreach and prevention. I see it, I read about it, I hear about it. It's inspiring. The work, for instance, that the 10-Point Coalition and Reverend Charles Harrison do every night, shown to reduce gun violence. It's inspiring. It makes all of us do our jobs much harder. I would say to them, continue to do it. I know that our enforcement efforts absolutely will not work. They won't work without community support and without prevention and outreach that so many people are doing. But I would say this to them, that your outreach efforts, your prevention efforts, will not be as successful unless they're supported by our enforcement efforts. Picture a three-legged stool: prevention, outreach, enforcement. Any leg is removed from that stool, you remove prevention, you remove outreach, you remove enforcement. If you remove any leg from that stool, it falls over. All three need to work together to reduce the gun violence problem. I've read a lot of letters that for some reason come to me, and I've heard the comments. People asking me for new or more gun laws. I'm not in the legislature. That's not something I have authority to do. But I would say this to individuals that are constantly asking and earnestly asking for new gun laws, that new gun laws will not work unless somebody enforces them. Gun laws have to be enforced. Firearms laws have to be enforced for them to work. So I'd ask those people who are earnestly looking for new and better laws to also support us, to support this group up here when we simply say we want to enforce the laws. For the cynics and pessimists, I know there's a lot of people out there that have heard federal law enforcement strategies and claim they won't work. Usually you have the cynics and the pessimists have a backpack of complaints and cynicism about law enforcement and federal law enforcement. I want to meet with you. I want to come out and talk with you. I want to unpack that backpack, your complaints and your cynicism one by one. And at the end of the day, I want us to stand together and ask that we enforce the federal laws. And finally, for those who don't support enforcing the federal laws, we have 2 law enforcement officers shot and killed because of violation of federal laws. We have violent crime now at 250% of the national average. And we have homicides at 400% of the national average. I submit to you it's time to change your mind. Project Safe Neighborhoods will work, but it requires the support of the community. It has to happen. The community has to support law enforcement efforts to reduce the shootings. So I'm asking members of the public to support our efforts, to support our outreach efforts, to support our prevention efforts, and to support our federal law enforcement efforts. It's time to enforce the federal law. My strongest partner in reducing gun violence outside of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosive has been the Chief of Police of the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department. We've traveled to other cities together where gun violence has been successfully reduced. I meet with him once a month. He informs me and helps me with this strategy, and I'm so happy he's here to join me today. Chief Brian Roach, who has done just a tremendous job for our city. Chief.
Thanks, Mr. Minkler. What you've heard today is a kind of a blueprint and a template for how not only this city, but cities nationwide are addressing the gun violence. The stark numbers that you heard should be unacceptable. They're unacceptable to the men and women of the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department. They're unacceptable to the community. And I want to encourage you that what you see, what was just discussed, is paramount to overcoming that. And there are strategies that work. Your question should be, well, how come it hasn't worked yet? How come we haven't seen the reductions this year? I think we will, and I'm confident that we will. It's about keeping guns out of the hands of people who should not possess them, and you just heard a discussion of why that is bad. And it's those black markets, it's those straw purchases that unfortunately ended the lives of these officers, and as a police department, we've had the same thing. But last year we had 156 people, members of our community, and so far this year we've had 63 members of our community who have suffered from the same consequences of that black market and those straw purchases. Unacceptable. Deterrence. What you've seen here today and what Mr. Minkler has talked about is there being consequences for the actions of people who should not possess guns. If you look, as we travel and look at other cities, it's that deterrence that has an impact. New York City goes from thousands of homicides to hundreds of homicides because those that carry guns illegally are dealt with. So those laws on the books are used. The other things that we continue to try and do, we work great with our ATF partners. Ballistics. Here in the city, we were just getting to the point where all that technology is actually having an impact, and we can say that these shell casings or these bullets from these different cases, now we can put those together and start identifying people. And you pick up the gun on someone in a traffic stop, and you start putting all those cases together. So those non-fatal shootings that in the past were so difficult to solve. Now we're having some success there. The men and women on the streets. Part of what we're trying to accomplish is being very targeted about this. There are people that we know of, and there are places that we know of that have the most impact on the violence on the city of Indianapolis. And all that information is shared collectively every 2 weeks, whether it's with our local partners, federal partners, and they all get together and discuss those people. And it's those cases that have that direct nexus to that violence that are coming to our federal partners. It's those cases that are coming to our local prosecutor, Mr. Curry. I've never seen the energy and the impact on each one of our districts, where you have police officers in individual units, you have ATF agents, you have the Marion County Prosecutor's Office, you have the U.S. Attorney's Office, all discussing the same people and the same cases and making a determination collectively how best to impact the lives of those people. Mr. Minkler talked about the community aspect. We cannot do this alone. In Marion County, we just identified a community reduction violence interrupter, for a lack of a better term, a director that rises and falls every day thinking nothing about the city other than how do I reduce violence. We've got a position open for people that have been in the game, ex-felons that have been through what a lot of our shooters are going through, that are now applying for the job and will be used effectively on these same people and these same places that we've done so much and taken so much effort in order to identify. The last thing that I would say is that these handguns are not just impacting shooters and our violence. Suicides are up 30% in Indiana. Most of those suicides occur with guns. It's important that people in the community recognize those people that may be in some sort of mental anguish. Those people, a lot of our shooters in a lot of these communities, there's just a sense of hopelessness. And if you're around those people with that sense of hopelessness, one of the best things that you can do is take away anything that might be lethal from them. So it's important that our community and our families and our friends and all those that, we all know who these people are and we all engage them. It's important that we step up and protect them. It's not just about arrests, it's about saving lives. And we appreciate the efforts that our U.S. Attorney's Office is doing and all of our local law enforcement leaders. And so thank you for what you do.
I would echo the chief's comments because we have talked a lot about numbers, and I know with the chief and I know with me, the first numbers that we both look at, I don't look at the number of people federally charged first. I don't, and the chief doesn't look at the number of arrests first. We look at the number of victims first, and that's what motivates us to do our jobs. Questions?
How often has this office pursued charges against straw purchasers, and what role do you see assistant U.S. attorneys assigned to these different districts?
The Attorney General asked us to increase our prosecutions of straw purchasers. We've done it several times in the past. There have been indictments not only of straw purchasers, but have also of employees of gun stores who have allowed guns to be purchased illegally. The exact numbers, Ryan, I don't have for you. Certainly I can get those to you later, if that's okay.
In the case against Ms. Rashan, how would those guns or that gun alleged to have gotten to Mr. Baumgart?
Yeah, we're still investigating that part.
What specifically did she lie about on the application?
Her address. Her address. Where she lived, she put down a fictitious address where she did not live, which is material, as you can imagine, when somebody purchases a firearm, you want to know where they live.
Sheriff Nielsen, how frustrating is it to you and those folks in your community when someone makes a illegal strawman purchase like this and the devastating impact that it had on your community?
Well, I think I said earlier that I don't think really anybody understands the impact that losing an officer has, not only on the family, but on the department. As I said, I'm not sure if we'll ever recover, but being able to be here today, work with our federal partners, receiving those phone calls within an hour, personal phone calls from every federal agency and state agency out there for assistance, allows us that strength to carry on and to move on. And this may be the beginning of sending that clear message that we won't tolerate this anymore. I've got four years left in my term, and I hope to God that it never happens to me again. I hope that it doesn't happen to our department or any family out there where we lose a police officer. And frankly, that scares me. So anything we can do to prevent that from happening, such as what Mr. Minkler has outlined here today, is very important. But what I can tell you is it's hard, and we're trying to get back to that new normal, and we'll eventually get there. But we need to make sure that we do the right thing, and this is doing the right thing.
Attorney Minkler, what are the responsibilities of the gun stores in this specific case?
Sure. To make sure and to verify that the information that is provided on the ATF form is accurate, and then with that information, run a check to make sure that the individual to whom you're providing the gun is not prohibited. If all those things come back clear, then the gun store can legally sell the gun. There's a lot of checks built into the system. The first check built into the system is to accurately fill out the form. In this case, the two individuals that purchased the guns from the gun store lied on the form. Had they told the truth, it's likely that the guns would not have been sold. Yes?
What was it about Ms. Rashawn that would have kept her from being able to buy the gun if she had
Sure.
listed her accurate address?
Sure. There is some law enforcement sensitive information, which I can't share with you now, but that would have triggered some things that would have prevented her from buying the gun.
In the case of Tiffany Dean, it said that when she was there, her brother held the gun, shot it, and he actually walked out of Top Guns with it. So is Top Guns in any way, responsible for the purchase of this gun? It seems that it was pretty obvious that the gun wasn't for Dean.
Sure. That's an inference that you're drawing. We looked closely into that and did not determine that the gun store had violated any federal laws. However, there are cases where gun stores and gun store employees do clearly violate the federal laws, and when that happens, they're prosecuted.
Okay, folks, thank you very much.